reacting live to the hot takes that you guys sent me. If you want to send me your own, link to my Discord is down below. All right, so I only have a couple for this video, but I have not read any of these. Let's go ahead. Mirrorwatch could be implemented into the base game and make it better. So I'm assuming they mean just like an arcade mode that just kind of always runs around. But I want to see what they've got here. I thought Mirrorwatch was fun, and a lot of the changes in there were really interesting. In fact, more so than most of the time we get them. So I want to see like what else they've got here. So to make what I mean clear, I mean we should add Mirrorwatch. Oh my god, add Mirrorwatch characters to the roster. Such as Brigitte, making an offensive Vanguard style support, or Bastion being a frontline shotgunner, and Sombra being a half support. I don't know exactly. I'm assuming you mean more like add characters that play more like these Mirrorwatch variants, not like making Brig become her Mirrorwatch self. I like that idea. I mean, like, I think Mirrorwatch had some really interesting ideas. The Sombra support was cool. I think the break changes were kind of weird but interesting at the same time. I'm trying to remember. Reinhardt's passive thing was a cool idea too. So they had a lot of interesting stuff. The vital goal is to imagine their goal on a team and have have each unique places where you may pick them. Some may even be able to be picked in new roles for their mirror. Oh, so are you just saying like add Mirrorwatch Brig as like an option where you pick Brig or Mirrorwatch Brig? For two fast examples, Sombra is a harassing assassin baseline. Her mirror is a supportive flanker. D.Va could be tank normally, but a DPS that goes into mech for her ultimate instead. It would be less development time for the dev team and could have some interesting gameplay impact for the game as a whole. I think that is a cool idea about, like, kind of increasing the roster a little bit. But I will say that's going to get a little confusing to be like, okay, what D.Va am I playing into? Is that Mirrorwatch D.Va? Is that real D.Va? Obviously you'll figure it out eventually, but like right when you know, there's part of Overwatch where it's like right when you see a character, you know exactly what they do. This is going to make that a little confusing. I also assume that you can't use like the Mirrorwatch version and the regular version of a character at the same time. But yeah, I don't know how much I support like adding like clone characters like this. More so than just like taking what they had. I get the idea. It's less so about like what they did in the Overwatch or the Mirrorwatch event itself, and more like the concept of adding a second faux character to the roster. I think it's a cool idea, but I just don't think it'd be that practical. Actually implemented into the game. I think it would cause some extra problems. But it's a cool idea, and I think having a game mode with it may be interesting, but in the main game, I don't quite see this panning out very well. But again, like, it's interesting. I liked Mirrorwatch. I thought it was one of the best game modes that they had made so far. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's a cool idea. All right, not every character needs to target squishies. Let me make sure I'm not... Yeah, it's fine. Tank main here. I understand and agree with most of the frustration with the state of tank right now, but I feel like some people are going a bit overboard. I've said this. I think the tank frustrations were a little overblown recently. That tank is inherently a hard role, and yes, I think it was a little too skewed to make it maybe not as fun as it should or could be, but I definitely don't think it was as horrible, unfun to play as so many people had really thought it was. Again, that's kind of the fun about like trying to navigate other obstacles that maybe your other team doesn't have. It is a harder role. That's kind of the appeal, in my opinion. But yeah. If you want to rework a character, the goal should be to take their current gameplay loop and flesh it out with more options for both sides. I mean, that's one way to look at it. I see when you say more options, I assume you mean like more counterplay and variability when for your team and the enemy team. So like you have more options against the enemy, but they also have good options and weaknesses to exploit around you. That's what I assume you mean. Now, I don't necessarily think that every gameplay loop needs to flesh out the current one, mainly because I think there are a couple characters who have bad gameplay loops that need to be kind of redone. Roadhog, for example, just a character that just doesn't fit anymore. Even in this format in Overwatch 1, anyways, he just is not really what we want to have in the game at all. So I feel like there needs to be some more fundamental change there. But I understand this idea of reworking. However, most reworks I've seen for characters like Mauga and Bastion seem to entirely delete their existing character and replace it with a new one. They're designed to deal with the enemy tank, and that's not inherently a bad thing. No, it's not. Obviously, characters are going to be stronger again. They're naturally going to be characters that are stronger against certain other characters. That's the point of Overwatch. Bastion's a little different because he is a DPS, but I do think there is a problem with tank characters also being the tank buster. Just because playing around them becomes really hard, and having frontline duels, you're always going to lose against that tank buster character. And not every character in the roster can circumvent a Mauga as effectively as maybe like a Winston or a Diva. So instead of there being real actual counterplay that in like say like Zarya's kit, for instance, to Mauga, instead you either have to, as a team, completely ignore him, or more realistically on ladder, that's really not going to be able to happen. So you're going to have a really unfun time trying to play into Mauga. Now, obviously, you could swap and do all of that, but I do think that there needs to be some counterplay, and just having a tank that is so tank bustery all the time, even, that's a bit of a problem, right? So either you change every character to be able to deal with Mauga in some form or fashion, or you just change Mauga, right? So there should be characters that do better against tanks than squishies. I agree, that's just always going to happen. It's totally fine. If you want to shift their power to smaller targets, you need to let them do what they're made to do. Mauga can't be bad against tanks, or else you've pretty much replaced him with an unrelated character. His players may not like, and you probably still won't play. The problem with Mauga, though, is that his gameplay loop is just generally uninteresting, specifically against tanks. Because it is literally just sit there and hold both guns and never aim because you don't have to. And you're going to hit all your shots and get all your sustainability, right? If you can get to the tank and set up cardiac and all of that, your game plan is just decently really boring. I think that, like, against squishies, that's where the fun of Mauga comes, is where you're trying to hit as many shots as possible, and then your aim and skill are rewarded with your health and overhealth coming back, right? Like, that's where Mauga should be, and I feel like there are some things that need to be changed about, like, how you reward that skill, because I think it's a little... It on paper, it sounds great, in practice, not so much. But against tanks, that just really isn't a thing. So, to me, like, Mauga shouldn't be bad against tanks, but he should definitely be a little less effective, because I feel like his identity shouldn't be surrounding only the tank, right? Like, when it's Mauga v Mauga, that meta sucks, and it's so boring, right? But when you have Mauga versus another tank, and he doesn't actually have to interact with that tank, that's when Mauga becomes more interesting. So how do we make it so that that interesting part of Mauga still applies to the tank role, or just some other interesting aspect of Mauga? He can still be better against tanks than most tanks. I don't think that is necessarily a problem, but I don't think his interaction with tanks and squishies should be so far removed, where one is much better and uninteractive, and the other is the more fun idea, but just not as good, right? So basically, I don't think Malga shouldn't be bad, or I don't think Malga should inherently be that much better against tanks. Um, but we just kind of have to like think about like what actually makes this character fun and engaging for both parties too, right? The translation of Doomfist from DPS to tank wasn't too massive of a change in concept, but it moved his game plan enough that it essentially became a new character with distinct, separate fan base, and some people still miss DPS Doom. I mean, whenever you change a character and rework them, there are going to be some people that come on and there are going to be some people that come off. Like it's just that's naturally going to happen. In my opinion, I think DPS or Tank Doomfist is as close as they possibly could to translating his kit to a tank while keeping a lot of what made Tank Doomfist or DPS Doomfist fun. No, obviously the one shots and the combos. And for whatever reason, his movement expression, it just feels worse. Like some of the stuff that was in Overwatch 1 is still there, but it just doesn't feel as good. Um, but yeah, this mobile in and out type of character is still there. I think that fundamental concept is there, and that's that. In my opinion, like I do miss DPS Doomfist to some extent, but honestly, the further we get from Overwatch 1, the more I forget that he was even in the game because he was so bad and so niche, but also so frustrating. And Tank Doomfist feels like a much more well-rounded, fair character with some things, you know, there's some other things about him that aren't as fair, but still, like, overall, much healthier kind of character for the game that kept a lot of what I liked about DPS Doomfist, so that when he became a tank, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm totally here to play this. Like, this is so fun to me. But yeah, I mean, like, when you rework characters, you are definitely going to lose people. And the loop is going to change in some form or fashion. Some people are going to find it fun, some people aren't. So I don't think you should really, like, especially if characters have some bad gameplay loop that needs to be addressed, you shouldn't really focus on trying to keep fans of those characters. I mean, you are reworking a character to make them healthier, to make them more fun and engaging. And if you've done your job about making them engaging, inherently a lot of people are probably still going to stick with the character. If you don't do a very good job with the rework and you change a lot of things, I feel like that's where more of the problems are going to lie. But yeah, that's kind of what I think about that. I'll let you guys, you can read the comments if you want. I'm not going to go into all like the discussions because sometimes there's a lot of discussion and we'll be here forever. All right, and then tanks are either broken or dead and sad. Here we go. So this is all, oh my god. I think we'll read this part because I think the rest is like him coming back and adding on. So tanks was the most depressing role to play, and after this new patch, which is the one that we're currently on, season 11 mid-season, they are now the most busted role in the game. They have an issue with counter swapping, being CC sponges and being hyper dependent on another role to succeed. They have an issue with counter swapping. I think that is a character design issue. There are some characters in the tank roster that cannot out counterplay in any form or fashion other comps or tanks. There are certain characters like Doom, I think Queen's decent at it, Sigma, that have good counterplay in built in. You know, they have weaknesses, but they have decent counterplay to other types of comps and things being thrown their way. Being CC sponges, I think that is a problem, especially for the hyper-mobile characters. Eating chain CC, even like it was a problem in Overwatch 1, it's starting to become a problem in Overwatch 2. And being hyper-dependent on another role to succeed. Now, I don't think that is necessarily true. In fact, most of what they aimed for an Overwatch 2 tank was for them to be independent on their own. Like, obviously, team play is important, but they're able to do more without another character, right? They have the power to do what they want. For the most part, this is how it works. Ironically, it's those characters like Melga, Orisa, Roadhog those hyper sustain characters that require the most resources more often, because they are such like damage sponges, that even though they have all the sustain in their kit, it is more than often still not enough. To me, that is a character design issue and not a tank issue, right? I feel like there's a lot of other characters that don't require that many resources on average, but we don't really complain about those because those are the characters that really aren't as good, and that's kind of also its own problem. But they mainly suffer from something I would like to call the Roadhog problem. Hog's an incredibly hard to kill. Or Hog is incredibly hard to kill, but when he is anti-nated, he dies almost immediately. So he needs to be strong enough to maybe live through an anti-nade if he plays well. If they don't have an Ana or anti-nade is negated, then he is borderline OP. All tanks suffer from a version of this. Do they? Here, let me see what they said, actually. They need to be able to live through the entire enemy team targeting them because it happens too often, but when they don't, they are oppressive. When this power was split in two, it was manageable, but now it is too much. I'm a tank main, but when I don't play tank, I feel like I'm just playing avoid the raid boss and don't get stuck alone with them. Yeah, I think this patch specifically, I've been feeling some characters, it's like, it's almost like dumb to shoot the tank just because like you'll do a lot of their health and then be like, oh, I'm gonna, finish them off, and then they get healed from their Ana and go into their armor range, and all of a sudden it is just like impossible to kill them anymore. But I'm trying to think because there's a lot. The anti-nade problem. Let's talk about the anti-nade problem. Yeah, I think there are certain characters. Again, it's a lot of the characters that are big bodies that don't negate any damage directly, that really suffer from this problem. Thinking or Hog, Mauga, or Risa, stuff like that. Characters that get overhealth, even though like Doom or Junker Queen, I think are much better into this. Even though Junker Queen has a self-sustain with health built in, I still think they're fine, because they get overhealth and they somehow can, and they have like decent mobility, stuff like that they're able to get away. They're kind of skinny, right? So I think it is really more of a design problem. Like, if Winston gets antied, he's typically okay. If D.Va gets antied, she's probably fine. She has a lot of armor, a lot of defense matrix, right? Like, I feel like I can go on and on about the characters that really anti doesn't really affect them too much. It's really those, like, problem characters. Again, it's really more like my problems with tank and why it's unfun to play against most of the time is that it keeps going into those hyper-sustained characters that need more resources than you think they would. I think it is really just a design problem. Their kits aren't very interesting. They have a lot of damage reduction that makes interacting with them not fun. I feel like you should always be able to interact with the tank in some meaningful way, regardless of what they're doing, right? When Ori just hits gold and she's unkillable for 4 seconds, that's not fun, right? But when Doomfist is blocking, there's still, like, something that you're trying to, like, like, what if we just keep burning him, right? We'll give him the punch, but it's fine. We'll just burn him down. He'll have way less health. Maybe he'll have to use that punch to get out instead, right? Even though that is, like, a damage reduction ability, it's much more skillful, thoughtful. Doom is damage blocking. What if I surround him, get my Tracer behind him, make him turn around, then I can get a shot on his back, right? There's much more interaction there. And also potential for the Doom to outplay, right? I think it's those kind of interactions that make characters... So, like, basically, you need to be able to live through the entire enemy team targeting you. I think that really only happens when they are raid bosses, right? Like, right now, when they are becoming buffed and buffed and buffed. But when Mauga and Orisa and Roadhog were meta, those are just characters that just need to survive and survive and survive and survive. And so you have to pump all the resources and it just becomes super tank-centric. But I think overall, in my opinion, if tank power was lowered, and I know this is crazy, if tank power was lowered across the board, health specifically, and they got their survivability from other ways, instead of, like, direct damage negation, if it was more skillful, if it was more risky to actually interact with tanks so that you're somewhat encouraged not to interact with them, then that would be, I think, solve the problem, because there'd be less people shooting at the tank, and then it wouldn't matter because you have less health. So they're not going to be like super big raid boss type of deal, right? So it's not necessarily a great thing to always focus the tank right away, because they may get something out of it. Yo, thank you, Future Samurai, for the follow. I'm filming a YouTube video right now. But yeah, I feel like the tank problem is that the easy solution is to just make them more survivable, so that when they get hit by all this stuff, that they're gonna be able to get through it. The problem with that is that it makes tanks less interactable, not as fun to play against, honestly more boring to fight. Arguably, counter-swapping gets worse. Like this patch, I feel like is just not the right direction. We need to find some way to make tanks less... Basically, it's riskier to shoot tanks. It's not like less... It's what am I trying to say? It's not like less reward for shooting tanks. It's more about like, if it's riskier to shoot the tank, then there is an active decision about like whether you're trying to focus them or not. And then inherently, they get some more survivability when the enemy team doesn't want to shoot them, right? Instead of just pumping numbers and making it so they eat everything, I feel like there are other alternatives to make tanks more interactable overall. More decisions, more of that. It's all more fun. People using their brain, I know it's a crazy concept, but sometimes using your brain is very fun. And trying to make decisions, that's very fun. So that's at least my opinion. I do agree. I think in a lot of our current balance and the philosophy of balance is that this does kind of just happen, because they want to make the entire role strong, and that creates its own lot of issues. So I do agree with you there, but I don't think that tanks being either broken or dead and sad is inherently always going to happen if we change the philosophy around balancing. But yeah, honestly, that's the take. So I'm just gonna go ahead and leave it there. If you want to read this in full, that's gonna be in my Discord. It's down below. And if you want some of your own hot takes, please join my Discord in the description below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Do any of that good YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe. It does really help me out. And also, if you want to get in on this action live, that's twitch.tv/Lane Hemingway. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays is when I do these discussions. I always try to do one every time I'm live. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.